Roses are one of the most beautiful and popular of all flowers. And I'll be catching up with a man who knows a thing or two about these beauties, as well as pretty much every other plant you can think of. He's an Australian nursery icon, and I'm fortunate to be taking a peek around his private garden. But first, let's see what else is on this week's show.
I'm going to show you my place, or perhaps more strictly, our place, and help you get some design ideas for your place.
I'll be looking at the finer points of growing citrus in containers with citrus expert Ian Tolley.
White oil is one of the most effective organic pesticides, and it's easy and cheap to make your own using household ingredients.
Quirky, colourful, curious, creative and unusual are just some of the words used to describe Kaden Blunt's garden. I'm in Altona North in the inner western suburbs of Melbourne, visiting a garden that is small in size but packed with colour and personality.
I'd describe my own style as organised but erratic and just not afraid to try new things.
The complex that Kaden lives in is made up of 4 units, each with its own small L-shaped courtyard. Oh, wow, how cool is this? This is something else. What was it like when you first came?
Oh, that's easy to describe. It's just dirt, weeds, and that's it.
And look what you've done. You transformed it.
It only took 10 years and 3 goes, but yeah.
Fantastic. And really, it's only a small area. It's just the side part of your house, but it's fabulous.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing. If I had a bigger backyard, it'd consume me.
But because it is a small space, you've got lots of things in pots, like this one here, for instance.
Oh, yeah. This is one of my favourite bonsais. He's just got a haircut and it's just all grown back. But when it's got a full foliage, it looks really nice.
Did working with the bonsais, did that sort of help you think about the scale of things in this garden?
100%, yeah. I can grow a plant in a pot and have it in that pot for its whole life as long as you cut back the roots and that.
Keep it small.
Exactly.
And I just love what you've got, all of the walls and the hanging things everywhere, and even down to the floor. You've got colour on the bricks. You've gone mad, man.
I know, yeah. My boy's seen that and he just walked out and said, "What have you done, Dad?" And I'm like, yeah, I'm not really sure, but
it's lovely.
It looks nice.
It looks lovely. Oh, perfect place for a potting bench.
I know, yeah.
That's great, because you grow mainly succulents and cacti. They're obviously your favourite.
Well, they're easy to get cuttings from.
Yep.
And I've killed a lot of other plants in the past, and they're just the ones that work for me.
They survive in Melbourne's hot summers okay?
Yeah, they need a lot of water. They need good drainage, but in winter, they just set and forget, which is good.
That's great. And so this is the stuff that you use to grow them in?
Yeah, this is...
What have you got there?
I've got normal sand, scoria, which goes at the bottom of the pots.
Yep.
Some fine rocks, and I just kind of mix it all together and with some fertiliser and...
So it's nice and light. I noticed your fertiliser dispenser. That is very funny.
Oh, yeah. One of my great inventions.
Yeah.
So...
look at that.
Just comes out.
And what is it? It's an old coffee dispenser?
Yeah.
That's
it works
funny.
a treat. So...
Bung it on the garden. That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And what I also like is the use of all the different containers.
Oh, yeah. Like, stuff like this, op shops are a gold mine. Old beetroot cans.
Yeah. And the mirrors everywhere.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
wonderful. Just bounced the light around. And our friend of mine gave me this. She was a hairdresser. And so this was the model that they use. I took it, chopped it off, filled it up with soil, and away she went.
Oh, I love it. It's a bit like Medusa's hair,
You love it?
I love it. What do you think?
I think it's a bit creepy myself, but yeah. What about up here?
Tell us about Phoenix. What kind of little lad is he?
Oh, he's a beautiful boy. He has a sweet nature. Be a little turkey sometimes, but most kids can be. Always wanting to help, always asking what he can do, and catching the fish in the pond. Growing up, my father's garden and mum's garden was the same. So it's just great to get him out here to play set up his toys in amongst the plants, and he can occupy himself. And
Yeah, he really loves it.
yeah.
It's great.
I think people need to just put the paintbrush in some colour and throw the cream in the bin and do what they want to do instead of what they see in a book or what people tell them they should be doing.
What's next for you?
For me, I'd like to just set my hammock up and enjoy my garden, and for my boy to play and have fun like I remember when I was a child. That's, I think, what's next for me.
White oil is one of the most effective organic pesticides, and it's easy and cheap to make your own using household ingredients. To make it, use 2 cups of sunflower oil, 1 cup of detergent, dishwashing detergent. This is concentrated white oil. Just mix it up like that. Now, don't forget to label the bottle. 1 tablespoonful of concentrate, you add that to 1 litre of water. Give it a good shake. And again, make sure the bottle is marked pesticides and it's ready for use. You use white oil to control sap-sucking pests, things like mealybug, aphid and scale. You apply it on woody plants, things like trees, shrubs, palms, bamboo and cycads. You apply it when it's nice and calm and overcast. Never apply white oil when the temperature is 30 degrees or more. And to apply it, once every 3 weeks, cover both sides of the leaves, cover all the stems right the way down to the base of the trunk. Remember, this is a suffocant, not a poison, so pests will never evolve a resistance to white oil. It's a great organic remedy.
I'm here to see Ben Swain, an Australian horticultural legend who's spent a lifetime working with plants and gardens. His family have been involved with the nursery industry for close to 100 years.
Dad started the business in 1917. He came home from the war and he was gassed in France and the Somme, and he remained a very ill man for many years. I started with my father in 1944, and I worked in the nursery from 44 to 2000.
Why do you think so many generations of the family have been involved with plants and gardening?
I just think it's the love of plants, and I think it's the work environment.
Even though he's now retired, Ben's as busy as ever working in his garden in Dural. It's big, about 1 hectare, and features all kinds of interesting plants. How would you describe your garden, Ben?
Well, it's a garden that I like, and it's probably not everyone's garden, but it pleases me, and it pleases me to look after it, and it keeps me going. It's the way it is because the nursery used to use it as a propagation source, and I've just kept on going with it.
So you used your garden as part of the nursery for stock plants. What were some of the plants that...
Well, the biggest, I guess the biggest producing plant in this garden was the camellia heads that's at the back of us there. And I reckon that must have supplied the nursery with maybe 300,000-400,000 Sasanqua camellias. It's just unbelievable the amount of cuttings that came off those plants.
Ben, the Swain name is synonymous with roses. What do you love about them?
I think the perfume and the variety, whether you want a climber or a bush rose or a miniature, there's one for every purpose.
Are there any particular favourites?
Well, this, of course, is the favourite one, the burgundy iceberg. It was discovered in our nursery. This rose was patented in America and it sold hundreds of thousands of plants.
So what are some of the other roses you've got in the garden?
Well, the pinkish or apricot one there, that's Tournament of Roses. And it's a particularly nice one because it sort of blows out, but it stays really like that in a vase. The other rose that I like, Glenn McGrath, had that introduced for his wife Jane, who died, and that's Jane McGrath I've treated differently in my garden this time, and I'm going to make a hedge out of it. I love it.
After all these years, roses still play a big part in Ben and his wife Suzanne's everyday lives.
We've been together for 62 years. I often bring her in a bunch of flowers. And when I was working at the nursery, I used to bring home too many roses, I think, at times.
Thank you, my darling.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Ben, from the rose garden into the veggie garden, this looks fantastic, but how did you find the time to look after veggies when you had this huge area of nursery to manage?
It was funny because, Costa, it was like a relief.
Therapy.
It sounds stupid to say it, but it was, and I got a great lot of fun out of it.
Now, after so many decades in the garden, I see there's been some modifications here with a ramp and some rails.
Yeah, well, I had a couple of nasty falls here. Then my son Philip came along and he said, I better put in a bit of a ramp for you, because you used to have to step up to get in the bed. Now this way, it's easy.
What's going on up in the far bed up here?
Oh, that's where you come into it.
Oh, geez.
Because I planted these Brussels sprouts, and I don't know whether they're a little bit late that I put them in, but they just bolted and they didn't form any Brussels sprouts.
Yeah, I think your observations are correct. Like, a bit like coriander without water, they bolt.
Yes.
Well, Brussels sprouts with heat will bolt. So if you plant them too late in the winter, as soon as the warmth of spring comes in, bang, you'll get a head like this. And you can see it in these smaller ones here where it's just going ahead. So, yeah, they're a cool climate plant. Yeah. Once there's warm temperature, no Brussels sprouts.
No Brussels sprouts, OK.
Their daughter Elizabeth is also carrying on the family's strong links with all things horticultural.
He inspired me and many other people to enjoy plants and to be in the nursery. By everything he did was absolutely the best practice, whether it was in the nursery or whether it was handling people. Dad always did things well. And there's been ABC local radio, the gardening programs on Saturday morning. There's been both of my aunts who did the program for many years, and I used to fill in when they were on holidays. And then for the last 15 years, there's been myself and my dad
doing
that program. The Legend, yeah. We're known as The Legend and The Rose on the radio.
I just love it, and a lot of people don't understand it. All my mates think I'm crazy. I just love wandering around and having this place to wander around in, and I think I'm lucky. At my age, which is 88, I think that if every person could enjoy what I enjoy in my garden, they'd have a new life.
Establishing plants on a sloping site can be challenging. Well, here are 3 approaches to get you underway. The first one, and the one that requires the most amount of work, is terracing, like here, where a retaining wall is built, and this one is made from dry stone stacking. And then behind it's filled with imported soil. Now you want to get at least 600 millimetres of fill to get decent plants established, including small trees. Now, a word of note is that retaining walls a metre or above are likely to need approval by your local council, so check that out. The next tip, further up the hill. A good way to establish plants on a site like this with really shallow soil is through mass planting of tube stock with very careful attention to microsite preparation. And by that, I mean digging a hole like I'm doing here, subsoil is well and truly broken up, but making sure there's a decent basin. So when you plant, there's enough area for water and mulch and other organic matter over time to fill that void so the plant roots can establish and then grow out. Just like that. And then some water. And that plant's underway. And the last one, and the easiest of the lot, is mulching, but with coarse mulch like this, which is shredded tree prunings. And what it does is it protects the soil from eroding away with rain and wind. And then when seeds blow in, they get trapped and are more likely to establish, eventually developing and re-establishing the site. Well, there you go. 3 tips for planting on sloping sites at your place.
You might remember I recently visited Renmark on the Murray River. for a masterclass with citrus expert Ian Tolley. I've come to see Ian again, this time about growing citrus in containers. The Great Australian Backyard is getting smaller and smaller, so this is an increasingly popular space-saving way to grow them.
I love working in this. And look, while we're at it, let's sort this container size. 100 litres, you're getting a bit too small if you want to keep this in a continuous production area. I've got 250 litres. Safety in the volume of water I can store, safety in the heat I can absorb, the fertiliser regime. I can produce a really nice crop in that size container or even bigger.
Now, what about choosing varieties? Are there some better suited to container growing?
None. They're all fine. Any variety that you want to consider, you can put in a container. The container will limit their size so you can handle it. You certainly don't need rootstocks. Dwarf rootstocks are great in the field, in a tight backyard or a front garden, where you're not going to use containers, and they will limit the size of the tree to about half size. So they're great. But in here, wasted effort, wasted time, just grow it in the container.
Ian uses a radical planting method we saw last time he was on the show. He washes the roots until they are bare and then spreads them out. He backfills until the tree's stem is at the same level relative to the potting mix that it was in the previous pot. The best time to plant is spring. Now, citrus are hungry plants and they rely on us for all their nutrients. How should we fertilise them when they're growing in containers?
Oh, composted chicken manure. Most of the firms these days have it added with extra nutrients, just like this. That's what you want.
And how often?
Monthly.
Okay.
Always monthly. You don't know what the roots are doing. Put it there, let them decide.
And how much do you give a tree? How do you know how much to give?
Well, look, use the manufacturer's recommendation, but always keep experimenting. Just keep adding a little bit, and if you happen to burn the very tip of the leaf and it goes brown, you know you've reached a point where you're just about absolute maximum. So do experiment, but you're safer with chicken manure than the commercial NPKs with all their additives. Get that wrong, you could burn the tree.
Okay. Now, what about deficiencies?
There's a tendency with citrus, particularly when they're cropping well, get a little bit short of zinc, a little bit short of manganese. You might even get to iron deficiency and then magnesium deficiency. Here's one here. That's a really typical magnesium deficiency problem. You can see the dagger. It's a description used worldwide. A green dagger from the petiole, and that's typical magnesium deficiency.
If you think your citrus might have a deficiency, you'll find helpful tips on how to identify it on the Gardening Australia website. Now, what does Ian use to treat deficiencies?
Chelating materials these days are freely available for your zinc, manganese, magnesium, iron. All of those are ground up so fine that when you spray them on the leaves, in fresh leaves, in young leaves, all that will go through the stomates, tree picks it up quickly. You don't get that in fertiliser that you put on the roots.
So we don't put it on the soil?
No, it won't go into the soil.
So you don't have to miss out on having citrus because your space is limited. Follow Ian's advice and put one in a pot. On the Gardening Australia website, you'll also find Ian talking about his solutions to common citrus pests and diseases.
This is my beetroot patch that I planted a couple of weeks ago, and it's germinated quite well, but now it's looking quite overcrowded. This is for a couple of reasons. One, I planted it with my 3-year-old daughter, but also beetroot has an aggregate seed, meaning you get 2 to 3 plants per seed. And they will need thinning out because beetroot's a root crop and therefore doesn't like a lot of competition. And if left unchecked, you'd find that out of this you get very few edible roots. Now, because nothing goes to waste, when thinning, you can get your younger seedlings, like this one, pull them out and replant. These bigger plants here are a little bit too established to transplant successfully, but I'm going to chuck these succulent leaves in a salad. Beetroot has a very hard seed coat, so it's a good idea to soak them before you sow. This can be done 15 minutes beforehand or even overnight. You know they're ready when the seeds actually sink to the bottom. Another good little tip is, because beetroot, like boron, a soluble nutrient, put a little bit in the bowl, and when they germinate, those plants will really take off. Now, if you've ever had problems with beetroot developing when you grow it, it's probably a boron deficiency, because a lot of our soils are actually deficient in this nutrient. By adding a bit to your watering can and watering it over your plants, you can almost watch them grow.
I've been designing landscapes and gardens for nearly 40 years, and it has made me certain of one thing. Your garden design must suit your lifestyle. Like, do I need space for kids or pets? An entertainment area? Lots of beautiful plants. So I'm going to show you my place, or perhaps more strictly, our place, and help you get some design ideas for your place. First off, Murphy and I like to get away a bit and visit beautiful gardens in other parts of the world, so our garden can't be too needy. And look, we're always really busy, so we couldn't maintain a large garden. It's a matter of a few meters from the front gate to the front door, but there's still a bit of maintenance in this small garden. I've made it formal so it suits the style of the Victorian house by using a box hedge around the edge and then just a single Chinese fan palm on each side as the focus to the planting space. Then into that, I've put cottagey planting. I've used the marvellous sea lavender, which I reckon is a great plant, both for its foliage and its flower. Some really nice Verbena bonariensis, which floats like a cloud up above everything else. And then there are golden yellow achilleas, some salvias, some Santolina, all within that colour range, giving me a combination of cottage and formality. Now let's have a look at the rear part of the garden. The aim here has been to try and create a garden where we see the best parts of it from inside the house. The garden becomes a green backdrop to our indoor living space, but it also becomes an extension to our living space outdoors. Now, this has taken some careful planning. What I've attempted to do is to put the utilitarian elements of the garden outside this space. So behind there is a shed and a water tank. And up the west side of the house, the vegetable garden and the clothesline. The vegetable garden gets great sun there, by the way. I've used pots, which maybe you wouldn't use in the front garden because it's a cottage garden. But here, these simple pots look great against the modern architecture. And of course, there's one here right on the axis from the front door. And I've placed another one over here, sort of symmetrically with it, so they're balanced within this garden space. There's a nice symmetry about those. I don't need lawn, the children have left home, and we do have the park right next door where Murphy takes me for my exercise. So we've been able to pave this space and make it really functional. And when we're alone, the two of us, well, we can sit and eat at this smaller space at the side here. So the area has two different sort of utilitarian areas to it. I suppose perhaps the thing that most people find most difficult about a garden is choosing the plants. I haven't got much time for maintenance, so what I've tried to do is to reduce maintenance by reducing plant diversity and choosing plants that grow well together in my conditions, and really, they're so tough, they take next to no work. What have I got? Well, along the fence line, I've got a lovely thing called the quandong, Elaeocarpus humundii. It's an Australian native evergreen shrub, and I'm clipping it as a sort of loose hedge. One plant's not doing so well, and that's because it gets that direct belt of northern light straight through there. But that will be better once the hornbeam grows. It'll close the gap and give it the protection it needs. I've got some agapanthus with these glorious big blue flowers, and I've used yuccas not only in the pots, but also in the ground, so there's a little bit of continuity between them. In here, too, I've got dichondra and Moroccan bellflower and a little bit of colour from impatiens, which I can change seasonally. As well as the agapanthus, I've got liriope, a marvellous ground cover, and some Trachlospermum asiaticum. When it came to choosing paving materials, I've extended the indoor paving of polished concrete out here. It's a very nice modern finish that suits this modern architecture. It really is important to plan these things carefully so they all form an effective whole, the house and the elements of the garden together. By identifying what it is you really want from your garden, doing some research and applying common sense, all of us can get more from our own little pieces of paradise.
Well, that's it for this week. I hope we've inspired you to try something new in your garden. Here's what's coming up on next week's show.
People are often a little bit scared when it comes to pruning native plants, but I'm going to show you just how easy it is.
It's always exciting to find a garden that's really got the wow factor. And I've found a pair of gardeners in Adelaide who have created just that.
Leafy greens don't always have to be green. I'll be in the patch to show you how colourful and delicious and easy to grow they can be.